Hello and welcome to Behind the Lines. I'm Diane Dayton. Today we're going to talk to author and also life coach, Dr. Ann Taylor, about her most recent book, Born Amish. This is for anyone who's really curious about the Amish way, and it's also her true story and reflections when she was a little Amish girl growing up in the community. Thank you for being here, Ann.
Sure.
How did this book come about? It was released this year in 2019, but it's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. I talked about doing it for a long time, probably 20 years.
Mm-hmm. I thought I remember that.
Right, but I haven't had time to sit down and really do it until after my second husband passed away and I had some free time.
Okay.
It actually took me about 2 years to do the research on it. I did a lot of research on it because I couldn't trust all my memories as a child. So I interviewed people who knew me and my family as I was growing up. Learned a lot.
Yeah, I bet you did. I love the voice that you have in this book. I feel like I'm sitting there right with you as that young girl with some of these reflections and relationships. But one of the catalysts, it was life before the excommunication. Address that.
Right. You want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
All right. I grew up right on the edge of the town of Intercourse. And my mother was from the Buena Vista area of Lancaster County, which is close to Gap. Very country, still very country. And my father grew up on a farm right outside of the town of Intercourse, which is now no longer a working farm. It was when I was growing up. And so I had two communities. I had the Amish community, which was our church district. Uncle Dan, who was my father's uncle, was a bishop. And Steph, who was the same age as my dad, was one of the ministers. And my best friend was Lizzie, who was the minister's daughter. So I got to be at their house quite a bit. So you would think I would have grown up very, very Amish in that setting. But I also had the influence of the town, which included a lot of entrepreneurs. There were lots of shops, and so most of the children grew up with entrepreneurial parents who owned stores, like an appliance store, grocery stores, blacksmith, shoe repairman, plumber, roofer,
Right.
artist, a lot of entrepreneurs. So I grew up in that environment. But and went to the public school, the Intercourse Elementary School, where we had a teacher in the first 4 grades who wanted to make sure we Amish kids were going to speak the English language well. So the first day I went to school, I'm trying to tell Mrs. Carter about the hooch that we have at home in the barn. And she didn't know what I meant by hooch. So she called one of my second cousins, an older child, up to the desk, and she told her it was a colt. It was a baby horse. And so that, plus my motivation to learn, really shaped me up. I didn't want to, be embarrassed again by that kind of situation. So I learned English well.
Yes.
Thanks to her.
Your grandmother played a big part in your life.
My grandmother.
Yeah.
I had 2 grandmothers.
Yes.
But I was closest to my father's mother, who lived within a quarter of a mile of us during most of my childhood and teenage years. I moved away from that in my early 20s, but they lived next door. I was very bonded to her because she was my babysitter from the time I was 6 months until I was 3.5 years old, when my mother quit her part-time job in a sewing factory. And very close to her, very bonded. And when she heard that my father would not give me the money for college many years later, she told me to come into the guest room with her. She pulled up the mattress, and I saw $100 bills, $20 bills, $10 bills. I was amazed that this woman had collected all this money. And she said, "How much do you need?" And I told her it was a couple thousand for the first semester and a couple thousand for the second semester. So she's counting out this wad that she gives to me. And then as we walk back out, she says, "Pay me as you can." She didn't mind when I was going to give it to her, but I paid it back in 2 years, one summer when I was working for my Uncle Ben's Motel, which is now Traveler's Rest Motel. And very bonded to her. I was also bonded to my mother's mother, but she was a lot like my mother. So I sort of put them into the same pot as a relationship.
So we talk about the Amish values that have really shaped who you are. Tell us more about that.
I think that's one of the reasons, I know that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I knew that I had grown up differently than the outside world that I was exposed to after college. And I wanted to find out what that was. And so I found it in the stories that I told in the book. I found the values. And I listed them in the back of the book.
Yes. Now, when you started doing this, you actually have another book here.
Yes. This one I wrote a couple of years ago called 6 Steps to Your Potential. And it's a workbook that I developed to help people do the work of the pep chart that is in this book. Actually, I started out with the pep chart.
Okay.
And I did this to understand myself. Develop these circles, and sort of a journalistic experience for me. The first step is identify your favorite activities. The second step, list what you do best or want to do better. Third step, choose words that best describe your strengths, and so on and so forth. There are 6 different steps. And when readers get through each one of these steps, they get to know themselves, and particularly their potential. What it is they really want to be doing, what the natural talents are, what the passion is. And so the workbook is to help people get to know how to do that. In this workbook, I gave examples of my role models, asking them to give examples of their role models, and mine were Amish. And as I was giving these examples, I thought, why don't I write a book about them?
And that's how this
and come
started.
up with the stories and do some research, and that's how the second book got started.
So it was all that journaling and reflection. And that took a bit of time, and you went deep for that too, didn't
I did.
you,
It was,
Ann?
a lot of it happened after my second husband passed away, and I had the time on my hands. I took out probably 6 years of my life to do that.
Yeah. What does it feel like having brought this book to fruition and being able to put it out there and share this?
It was fun. It was fun. Some people, I think, are embarrassed by their Amish background. I never have been.
Yeah.
I thought I was lucky to have been Amish, to have experienced that.
Yeah.
But I had great parents, I had great grandparents.
And you learned so many important values that have served you well with your life. Your website is what? It's dranntaylor.com, correct?
Yes.
So on this website, we're going to find out more about how we can get the book. There's also going to be a book signing, and that's going to be at Discover Lancaster on Saturday, April 13th at 11 a.m. If you missed that, you can find out other ways to get the book and other possible signings that come up too. But what we're going to do, we're going to take a brief pause. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the book, The Life Before the Excommunication. We're going to talk about the values and get into a little bit more about what this book, Born Amish, is really about, because I think this is a wonderful book,
Right.
Anne. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're watching Lancaster Community TV, LCTV 66.
Welcome back to Behind the Lines. We're talking to author and life coach, Dr. Ann Taylor, about her most recent release, Born Amish, Life Before the Excommunication. If you're just joining us, this book is available on Amazon. It's also available on her website, dranntaylor.com, and it will be available too also at Discover Lancaster, the visitor center across from Costco. This book is such a gem and has so many stories in here. It gives us an understanding of what it was like for you growing up Amish. Life before the excommunication. Tell me what happened with that.
With the excommunication? I was living my life, and so were my parents. And my father and my grandfather had a good friend, Ike Smoker, who was an inventor. He had sold his farm in the intercourse area in order to use the proceeds, the money, to develop this farm elevator that he had in mind. And it was a forerunner to another one that was later developed by Sperry New Holland Machine Shop, later became Sperry New Holland. Quite a big deal. And he was smart. He had invented a number of different things before this, but this was going to be his big project. And it got to where the selling of the elevator was so successful that it did not get the approval of the bishop. He said it was growing too fast. He had 12 employees. He had things that in the shop that were not yet approved by the Lancaster County bishops, things like a generator, which the Amish all have now, a generator that was running the welding machines, and it had, there was even electricity and telephone that was put in by a business partner who was not Amish, and that had not yet been approved by the Amish bishops in Lancaster County. Now it is. And so there was a special meeting set up to discuss this, special church meeting. And most of the, I think all of the bishops in the area and probably all the ministers were on the side of Uncle Dan. There were no ministers who were on Ike Smoker's side. But there were 10 or 12 father-son combinations, elders of the church, who were supportive of Ike Smoker. He had used their fields as part of his research to try it out. They were just good friends.
Right.
And so at this meeting, they were all seated on a support bench. And after some discussion, I understand it was 2.5, 3 hours discussion, Uncle Dan looked at Ike Smoker and he said, "I'm going to have to excommunicate you if you don't sell your business." And all of a sudden, one of the voices on the bench, which may have been my grandfather, probably was, but I've never found, no one's ever told me, he said, "If you excommunicate him, you're going to have to excommunicate all of us." So the bishop was put in a corner. So he very quickly said, "Then you're all excommunicated." Elders of the church, to his own brothers. And So my father and grandfather, an ex-smoker, joined another church community called the Weavertown Amish Mennonite Church, where they allowed big businesses or businesses that were growing. They decided to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember any ranting or raving about it. It was just in their mind that time to move on. This wasn't going to work in the old order system.
Mm-hmm.
And several weeks later, Uncle Dan decided that he was going to invite all of these men back into the church if they admitted wrongdoing. They admitted that they had done wrong in standing up to the bishop. These three men decided they hadn't done anything wrong, and they weren't going to admit that. The others did. All of the others did. And a lot of my research was done with one of the men who sat in that meeting.
Okay.
So I learned a lot.
Yes, you did. Looking at some of the Amish family values, meaningful or satisfying work that pays the bills and makes people happy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised by that. I grew up thinking work was fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard,
Right.
hard work. Some of it I didn't want to do, like milk a cow at
Right.
age 10,
Right, right.
do all that work in the yard. But working with other people was fun. Working with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
My mom always made work fun. They enjoyed what they were doing.
And that's
so-
where you get into the teamwork.
Right.
And self-employment, the flexible work schedules, that's so much a part of
It's very
your
much
upbringing.
part of the Amish world I grew up with. Self-employment, doing things at your own pace. But the cows have to be milked at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, they're standing outside the gate
Right,
waiting to be milked.
right, right.
And the crops have to be brought in at certain seasons of the year. So you're not totally in control, but you think you are.
Right. You talk about partnerships too, and partnerships in marriage.
Yes. Most people I've talked to think Amish women are passive. I didn't know any that were.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one man that I dated thought I was going to be passive.
He found out.
And they don't speak up in public. They're very respectful of the husband's authority, and there is a lot of husband authority. They are in control of the finances. The women have the checkbooks, at least the ones I've known, and they can spend whatever they need to spend for household expenses, children expenses, within limits.
Mm-hmm.
Big purchases, both of them make it. One doesn't agree, it's not done.
Mm-hmm.
Well-defined roles. The women know what their roles are, the men know what their roles are. They're taught those roles in childhood. Most don't rebel.
Mm-hmm.
When I did my doctoral dissertation on entrepreneurial Amish women, I found that there was no women's liberation among them. The women were doing what they had to do in order to help with the family finances. But they were just as happy to have the men make most of the money if they could.
Okay. There was a real attitude, and there is a real attitude of gratefulness too, isn't there?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Gratefulness, non-judgmental attitudes,
Right.
and quick to forgive yourself and others.
In my family.
Yeah.
I'm talking about my family
Right.
values.
Right.
Grandparents, parents.
But that's what you experienced, right?
That's what I experienced. Yeah, my dad would say things like, God wants to bless us, but we have to do our part.
Okay.
And my mother focused on gratitude a lot. Be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Don't complain about the rain. We need the rain, was a line of hers.
Yeah.
Don't grumble. Don't complain. It'll all work out.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, and Dad was into gratitude too, my grandparents. Blessings and gratitude.
Yeah.
God is a good man. He's a good man.
Yes, yes, yes.
Was another thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
This book, what do you want us to get out of this, Anne?
I think I want people to understand that Amish are probably not who they think they are. There's a lot of misconception about the Amish. And also that every Amish family is different.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
These aren't necessarily Amish values, but they were the values of my family, including my grandparents. I can't speak for the rest.
Okay.
But for example, the Amish women I knew, except for one woman, were very kind, and they liked children. They were very helpful, except for one, and I mentioned her. That's Aunt Feeney. Chased me with a broom one time when I was 5, when I was throwing stones at her shutters. I thought she was a witch, but I also knew that she was different
Right.
than other Amish women.
Right.
And my mother would tell me that.
Okay.
She's different. Be nice to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you've done a wonderful job of telling your story, and the stories in here, like I said earlier when we first started, the voice that you have in here, I think it's an easy read in that we are brought into it in such a way that it feels very real. So thank you for writing this book. And thank you for doing the pep chart too, which I know you're doing wonderful things with and changing lives as a life coach. And much success with that and with the book. So April 13th, which is a Saturday, 11 a.m. at Discover Lancaster at the Visitor Center. They can see you, can get a book if you happen to miss the date, or you're watching this show later. You can find the book there at Discover Lancaster. Also online, which is at dranntaylor.com, and it's going to also take you to Amazon to get this wonderful book. Thank you for taking time today.
Well, thank you, Diane.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us today, too. I'm Diane Dayton with Behind the Lines, reminding you to look behind the lines. You might be surprised what you find.